welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Similary Breast Pumps. Similary breast pumps have ultra tiny pumps as small as a sticky note to fully adjustable pumps with 85 combination settings. You're in control of your pumping journey. And today's episode is also brought to you by a new sponsor, Mama's Liquid Love. Mama's Liquid Love breast milk jewelry is a way to hold on to memories, mark milestones, and show the people you love that they mean the world to you. And we will hear more from our sponsors later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page. See if you need anything. And if you can find it there, you can give them your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, scroll down and enter your email address and we'll send you episodes straight to your inbox every week. And we are on Patreon. And I don't know, I really feel like I talk about it a lot, but you know, I don't know. If you're sick of hearing it, you probably fast forwarded through everything I'm saying right now anyway. But Patreon is really fun because we are having, we have monthly Zoom hangouts where we all like hang out together. And then we have extra content. We have ad-free episodes. We have mini podcasts. We have weekly wellness checks where everyone just kind of talks about what's going on with them and they ask advice. Just vent. And so we have a big welcome to Ashley, to Derek, to Mariah, to Nicole, to Sarah, Sandra. I'm going back now because Nicole K, because I've been slacking on that. So welcome to everybody who joined us on Patreon. And, well, you can find the link in the show notes under this episode. And you'll find the link. You can look at the tiers. And then we're also hosting our ongoing giveaway. Send a screenshot of your review and your address to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com. And we will send you a goodie bag of stickers and thank you for nursing in public cards. And people are doing it. People are doing it. Lots and lots and lots of stuff has gone out all over the world. So go ahead and do it.
I know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And now Dianne has our review of the week.
Yes. I'm inclined to say my almost 13 months of exclusive breastfeeding has been the result of luck, but that would be selling myself short since it's truly the result of educating myself and seeking supportive resources. This podcast has been an incredibly supportive resource for information, comfort, and solidarity. I confidently breastfeed anytime, anywhere, be it on an airplane, in a carrier, on a hike, or sipping a beer at a brewery. Huge thanks to Dianne and Abby for providing this great resource for all breastfeeding folks.
Aww.
And another one that's over a year. If you were listening last week, you heard us talking about how rare it is that people get to over a year and continue on with their breastfeeding journey because it's just not as common here. Well, anywhere, probably. Well, there's places in the world where it is. But here in the United States where we are, it's not as common. People go back to work at 3 months. They're just, or sooner. And they're just not able to continue breastfeeding. No. It just becomes a really huge challenge. So getting to a year and beyond is really, really amazing. It's quite a feat, I should say.
It is. That's fun and awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you realized that you would sell yourself short if you just left it up to luck, because this is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work. And there are people that put in the work and it still doesn't work out for them. And that sucks. But if it has worked out for you, it's because you put in the work.
I've seen people breastfeeding in a brewery before. I remember she was breastfeeding in a brewery and I went up to her and said something to her. And she looked like she was a little nervous at first that somebody was coming up to her. Probably thought I was going to tell her she shouldn't be doing that in here.
Totally.
But, of course I wasn't going to say that to her. I was just like, that's good for you. Whatever I said, I can't remember what it was. But, and then I saw I was at a fundraiser at a bar one time and saw one of my clients breastfeeding her baby there. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
That is cool.
But it is. I mean, and it just, and you hear things all the time about airplanes that, people get says, somebody says something to them on an airplane and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, come on. Give me a break.
I know. Just
get
shut
over
up.
it. Shut up and get over it. It's just,
I know.
So
I feel like we need.
I know. We have lots. If you're somebody that's new to listening and you're unsure about breastfeeding in public, we have lots of breastfeeding in public episodes to kind of help you. But life is just easier if you can just feed your baby where they need to be fed.
Life would be easier if everyone would just shut up.
There was when I was working as a peer counselor, there was this one other peer counselor that I was working with. She was a riot. Her baby and she was older at this point. She was well over a year, toddler. She was like a toddler. And they were at someplace like a clinic or something, getting like vaccines or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the situation was. And the baby's dad was with her. And she started nursing her there at the place. And he was like, do you have to nurse her here? And she goes, here is where she's hungry.
Perfect.
I was like, that is a great response. But it's just,
it is,
I mean, a lot of times you have partners that don't support it or family members that don't support it, or, and it's just like, just do what you got to do. It's just,
yeah. I think those episodes are really helpful because you can just kind of mentally prepare for the experience. Like probably nobody's going to say anything. Probably it's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. But just to have the kind of what the law says, even have those little laws printed out, have some comebacks or something, up your sleeve. And yeah, those are good episodes just to kind of get your mind wrapped around it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes really easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes like second nature after a while.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah. So congratulations to you. That is awesome. Thank you so much for sending that in. I hope you got your goodie bag. And as we've mentioned before, if it's been a long time and you did not get your goodie bag, definitely reach out to us because sometimes we just lose track of the addresses or whatever, emails. And it's just us working this show. So cut us a little slack every once in a while. Sometimes we forget it.
Yeah. No, I and people have reached out. Like a couple of people are like, I didn't get my goodie bag. And then it'll be like from December. And I'm like, don't wait that long.
I know.
You don't have to wait 3 months. Like maybe wait a couple weeks. And then if it's not, just check. You will not offend me at all.
Yeah,
it'll probably
totally
be me,
fine.
Abby, answering the email. You will not offend me at all. And then if you tell me, then it's very easy for me to keep to look back and see what happened. And you may have saved yours and other goodie bags if you reach out and let me know.
Yeah, so definitely let us know if you didn't get it.
But also, this is not like a common thing. Like most people get their bags immediately.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't trust the postal service either. So I'm always afraid things are going to get lost.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're not going to get there or something's going to happen to it or whatever because it's, it's not your normal little package.
I know. My mom, she'll I live in Chicago. My mom will be like, well, you didn't get my card. I sent it the other day. And I'm like, I live in Chicago, Mom. Like, who knows where that is right now?
Yeah.
It'll get here when they get their shit together.
Yeah. Yeah. My niece who lived in New York City for a while would say the same thing.
Oh my God. My sister lives in Brooklyn. She's like, she has like specific instructions for when I send her stuff. Cause she's like, I am not going out to the UPS thing out like an hour from my house in this like scary neighborhood. So she's like, do this.
Oh God. It's too much work.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about something a little different, but I had this come up as a request. So this came as a request from a listener who is also a client. And she was looking for an episode on other providers that help with breastfeeding. And I was like, she asked if we had an episode on this. And I was like, I don't believe we do have an episode on that. So, believe it or not, how many episodes do we have? 400 or something like that?
Yeah.
Almost 400 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And did not have an episode on this. So thought we would do it. And
I feel like we've talked about it in pieces here and there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how you might get referred to, you know, some sort of specialist or something. But yeah.
But then we don't talk about like what they do or anything like that.
That's true.
So the first one is infant chiropractic. And a lot of times people are very on board with this, and a lot of times people are not very on board with this. And I think the reason why they're not on board is because they don't really realize what they do. They are fantastic for your babies. And you can take your baby to an infant chiropractor, and it has to be, this is the catch. It has to be a chiropractor that is trained in infants, because this is the thing. When they're in chiropractic college, they get a little bit on infants, but they have to in order to be trained in infant chiropractic, they have to take a whole separate course. Some of them do it, some of them do not. If they have not done it, I wouldn't take your baby to them. Not because your baby's going to be hurt, because I don't think that would be the case at all, but they might not be able to solve the problem because they don't know what they're looking for, because they're not trained in infant chiropractic. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I've definitely had that where people would come in and they'd be like, well, yeah, we're seeing chiropractic too. And I'd be like, okay, is it a chiropractor trained in infants? Well, they said they do infants. Okay, but are they trained in infants? And then when I look them up, they're not trained in infants. So it's like, okay, they're not, no wonder we're still having problems, because they're not doing it. So the reason why people, I think, are nervous about it is because they are afraid their baby's going to be harmed. And they think about what happens when they themselves go to the chiropractor and their neck gets snapped and their back gets snapped. And it's like, they imagine that with their baby. And it is not how it goes. That is not what happens with your baby at infant chiropractic.
I don't know if you know this, but I took Jack to a chiropractor for a while when he was a baby.
Oh, cool.
But it wasn't for feeding. It wasn't any kind of feeding thing. But yeah, they didn't do that to him.
No, they totally don't.
He just sat on the table and they did things he barely even realized they were doing.
You're like, what are you doing to my baby? Doesn't even realize anything is happening, because it's very therapeutic, kind of massagey. They're just like, they know what they're looking for. The reason why we send them, there's a couple of reasons why I suggest stuff like this. Babies, if you think about where they come from, right? Not like, oh, how are babies made? Not like that. They're like in a womb for 9 months, growing, and then they become too big for that womb, so they have to be born. They get all sorts of jacked up, right? Like, and then they come through a cervix, like through the vaginal canal. Like, how small are these spaces for these babies? Then you pop out this baby and he weighs like 8 pounds. It's like, oh my gosh, how is nothing tight, and muscles are tight and things are compromised and necks are tight and only looking in a certain way. Sometimes your baby's only looking in one direction, and then they get a flat spot on the side of their head because their head will only turn in one direction. And that's directly related to how they were positioned in the womb. Yeah. And then sometimes they don't feed well.
Well, and you think about how babies are born too with all these interventions. Like, if your body is given the time to kind of use contractions to get there'll be less of an issue, probably, maybe. But that's not what happens with a lot of births. I mean, I know mine, Jack, the doctor was up by my head, pushing down on the top of my stomach to push him out the hole.
Yeah.
Like, how does that even help? That's not how the baby's coming out. It's not that it's not being pushed hard enough. But
oh my God.
I mean, that's not, of course they're going to have, there's consequences to these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And babies sometimes are not in optimal positions. C-section deliveries are really rough. I mean, there's definitely babies their muscles get tight. There's just, and the way that it can impact your feeding is positional. Sometimes babies, if you have a baby that latches really great on one side and on the other breast, they don't latch well at all, that is likely due to some asymmetry from positioning. And that is stuff that chiropractics really help with.
Yeah.
Could be tightness. Like I had a baby the other day that was born. She said the baby's arms were like behind her. One was like tucked up. Sometimes if their arms are like tucked up, like that, it just messes them up. Like she was all tight and arms were all jacked up behind her and everything else when she was born. Like that kind of stuff is like, you gotta help them to stretch out a little bit. And that's one of the things that chiropractic can really help with. They can help to kind of get their little systems working the way they need to be working. I don't know all the magic that they do, but they can really help to get everything going the way they need it to. They can help them poop because a lot of babies, once they get adjusted, did that happen with Jack?
Yeah. That was always the thing.
Right,
she would like, just remember, he's going to poop a lot when you get home. And then he would have a giant poop. Yeah,
they help them poop. They can help with reflux. It can help a lot to have these little babies. And like I said, if they're looking only to one side, if they have what's called torticollis, where the one side of their neck is like really, really tight and they're not able to move their head the way they need to, and they're not able to move their neck around, the baby can get a flat spot on the side of their head. And that would be like, we don't want that. We want their head to be nice and round, but if they're only laying on one side of their head all the time, that's going to be problematic. So that is something that chiropractic can really help with. Cranial sacral therapy is another one. And for chiropractic, like you don't have to wait. Like your baby can go to chiropractic like as soon as they are born, like within a couple of days of their life. Like they're born, they go, you're in the hospital a couple of days or whatever. I've had babies that were seen by chiropractic like the next day that they got home.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait a certain amount of time, but it is really important that it is somebody that is an infant chiropractor. There's one in my area I've got a couple that I work with in my area that I really like a lot. One of them has a very active Instagram and TikTok, and she's really good because she does lots of videos and she shows exactly what she does with babies. And she's really good. It's ANH Wellness. If anybody wants to follow along with her, and she's got her own baby. She's got a baby who's like 8 months old, and she'll show like stuff that she does with her own baby. And it can be really helpful to people who don't realize how important this could be for their infant. It could be a game changer. Seriously, It can be really helpful. Oh, why don't we take a break and then I'm going to talk about the others.
Okay, great.
I didn't realize how late it was. Yeah.
I didn't either. We'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Similry Breast Pumps. Similry Breast Pumps wants you to have control of your pumping journey with a continuous focus on research and development and a team comprised of CLCs, that's certified lactation consultants. Similry Breast Pumps strives to offer pumps for every lifestyle, like ultra tiny pumps as small as a sticky note for people who are super duper on the go, to fully adjustable pumps with 85 combination settings when you like it to be just right. You're in control of your entire pumping journey. And they have resources like virtual breast shield sizing consults in English and Spanish, and Get the Right Fit program that offers a third set of breast shields for free if the ones that they come with are not the exact fit that you need. Similry gives you vital tools for a successful journey, a safe choice for everyone because all Similry pump parts and storage bags are phthalate and BPA free. And better yet, the Similry breast pumps can be personalized with a fun pump skin decal. I love how it's just like another accessory now that you can express yourself with. So you can check out the entire Similry Breast Pump family at similrybreastpumps.com. That's CIMILRE breastpumps.com. And you can use code BADASS for 15% off of your order. And today's episode is also brought to you by Mama's Liquid Love Breast Milk Jewelry. Mama's Liquid Love is a way to hold on to memories, mark milestones, and show the people you love that they mean the world to you. Moms all around the world mail Mama's Liquid Love their inclusions, and through a unique chemical and mechanical process, they convert your inclusions into a beautifully crafted keepsake. Mama's Liquid Love has created over 25,000 pieces in the past 10 years for moms around the globe, so you can trust them with your liquid gold. Mama's Liquid Love specializes in high-quality, expertly crafted DNA keepsakes made from breast milk, hair, ashes, placenta, umbilical cord, or flowers. Your breastfeeding journey will end someday, but you can keep this keepsake forever. You'll find 150 pieces to choose from on mamasliquidlove.com. That's MAMMAS liquidlove.com. Use code BADASS for 10% off of your order. And I have lots of breast milk keepsakes, and I highly recommend that to anyone who's breastfeeding.
Yeah, I was just telling Abby I wanted to get one for my dogs with my dog hair.
Yeah, because you can do with the fur. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was telling Diane that I had some from Exley's umbilical cord, and from both the boys' breast milk and both the boys' hair, a curl from their hair. And it's just really sweet, fun thing to have.
It is. It's really cool.
Yeah. And today's sponsors and their promo codes can be found in the show notes under this episode, wherever you're listening from. And they can also be found over at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, where you'll find all of our other episodes and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Diane.
Yeah. The other one that I do a lot of is infant. Well, I call it feeding therapy, but there's speech language pathologists that specialize in infant feeding. And this is super helpful. Like, so helpful. Like, of course, I only see babies that are struggling anyway, but I can't tell you how many times I send a baby to feeding therapy. Like, it just, and you would think like, well, this is natural. Babies are supposed to be able to do it. But again, interventions, and sometimes babies just are uncoordinated and struggling to make it work. So they need a little bit of help. And that is what the feeding therapists do. They have like special exercises that they can do to really help with babies that are not sucking the way they need to be sucking. Maybe they're not moving their tongue the way they need it to move. Maybe they had a tongue tie release and they're relearning how to use their tongue. This is something that they can really help a lot with. Sometimes I have babies with like a hypergag reflex, which can make it difficult for them to bottle feed, for them to take a pacifier. So those kinds of things are really, really, I mean, I don't know. A lot of times people are like, well, what are they going to do? And I'm like, I don't know what kind of magic they do either, but they do some really great, like, I can't tell you, like, because I'm not a feeding therapist that. I'm a lactation consultant. So
that's why you refer to them, because you then run into something where you need the help of a specialist, which is what a pediatrician could do when there's breastfeeding issues.
Yes. And this is really helpful for these babies. And one of the things that I always tell parents is, you know, because sometimes babies can make the breastfeeding piece work, but they can't figure out a bottle. And this is, you know, really, really, really stressful if you're trying to go back to work and your baby's not taking a bottle. So something like that is like where we would want to do, okay, let's do feeding therapy. But sometimes it's like, okay, I think your baby is probably going to figure it out, but I would be concerned, like, what if they don't figure it out, or they're breastfeeding well, but what happens when they get to solid foods? Are they going to be able to manage that? And a lot of times parents are like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. So that is something like, if they're not feeding well, then we introduce solid foods with a spoon and they're just going to automatically get it. Like they're going to need some more help. So sometimes if your baby is not doing well, and this can be like what I have seen a lot too is parents that have a really like healthy milk supply, like have a lot of milk and babies are really growing well. That can mask a lot of problems. And sometimes then we get these babies that are not really feeding well. They're just kind of catching the milk because it's flowing so much into their mouth. And then I see them for a different reason or whatever. And it's like, okay, they're not even really sucking well at all. And then we get concerned like, okay, what's this going to do to milk supply over time? What's this going to do for a baby that is going to need to take a bottle at some point because of work? What is this going to do with solid foods? Like we need to figure out why this baby is not sucking the way they need to be sucking. And this can go back to, like I said, some babies are just uncoordinated and it just, they just need a little bit of help getting themselves acclimated, getting themselves coordinated. We have some babies that just have like a swallowing dysfunction. They're just not managing. They're just disorganized. And sometimes things like this can happen like from medications. There is research to show that like epidurals, things like that, the medication that's in an epidural can cause some coordination issues, some feeding problems. So that some suck coordination problems. So that is something that we see sometimes with medicated deliveries. But it also can happen if parents are separated from each other and you can't help that, right? Like these are things that you can't help. And sometimes babies just need a little bit of help getting started. And we just kind of assume that they're just going to know what to do. And then when we add all these interventions, that takes the place of that, like they just don't know what to do sometimes. So if babies are separated from their parent, maybe they're separated and they're not able to eat, they're not supposed to be eating for whatever reason they're separated from their parent for, stuff like that can cause them to just not do well. When it's finally you're able to put them to the breast, it's like they just don't do well with it. So feeding therapists can be really, really helpful. A lot of times people will be like, what's feeding therapy? I've never even heard of that. And just like they do exercises with your baby. Sometimes they implement pacifier use to be really helpful. Pacifier use, I know people say, don't give a pacifier. Oh my God, it's going to ruin your breastfeeding. Pacifier use can be therapeutic when used in a specific way. So this can sometimes be therapeutic. I had a parent not that long ago who was like using bottles, using a nipple shield, and they asked me if a pacifier was going to be a problem. I was like, we're already doing all the other things. Like, it's totally fine. Like, you're fine. Babies, the only time I ever see babies that struggle because of pacifier use or because of bottle use is because they're struggling with breastfeeding anyway. They're having a hard time with breastfeeding as a whole. Sometimes feeding therapists will have you use very specific bottles because they know which bottles are really good for babies that are not taking bottles well, or babies that are struggling to try to kind of get themselves coordinated. They can sometimes help with like what kind of bottle to use. So they can be really helpful. And if you need one, like try to find one in your area. I don't know that they're in every area. I don't know that everybody's got them. I have looked for feeding therapists in different parts of the country just because of, doing consults for people all over the country. I have looked for feeding therapists and you can usually find one. And they do help with lactation. They do help with, breast and bottle feeding. Babies, I mean, they know this is what happens with babies sometimes. So they can be super helpful. One of the other things that I don't know a whole lot about, but I do know it helps is cranial sacral therapy. Have you ever done anything like that?
I have not. I have heard. I knew a woman who did it, and she would sometimes walk up to Jack and like touch his head. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what she was doing, and she'd be like, "Oh, I'm a cranial sacral therapist," and I'm like, "Okay." So I guess she was just giving us a freebie or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd never pursued anything like that. I don't know much about it either.
It's really cool. I mean, it's hard for me to explain. I did actually take a 1-day course about it. It was like a crash course.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was a couple of months ago. And it was like me and it was like this feeding group that I'm part of. And it was like chiropractors and feeding therapists and me, some other lactation consultants. And like, it's really cool because they work with the fascia and they work like with your muscles. It's very like they barely are touching you.
Yeah.
And they had us practicing on each other and you really aren't, it's like certain pressure points and like, it's really fascinating, but they can really help a lot too with things like position, with things like sock. They can be super helpful. And I mean, when they were trying to, I was like not getting it, man. Like I was trying to find, because you're supposed to be feeling these things on people. And I was like not feeling them. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I could feel it a little bit, but then I was like, well, show me. Cause some of it was really like can calm you, really calming, really like can bring down anxiety. I was like, show me how to do this to my kids because that would be really cool. Like before tests, before like schools tests or things that they were nervous about or whatever, I could be like, oh, let me do a little bit of on your head or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't, it's a lot. Like it's so cool, but they barely like, that's another thing. And I had it actually done to me before too. And like once, and it was cool. Cause she was like, I don't know, like, have you ever been in a car accident or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, when I was like 15 or something, I smashed my head on a windshield.
Oh my God.
In a car accident. Well, remember, and of course, nobody remembers these kind of seats, but my mom had one of those cars where if you push the seat up, the whole seat would go up, like the bench seats, which cars aren't like that anymore.
No.
But that's how my mom's car was at the time. And my sister was driving and my sister's short and I'm tall. So I was like pressed up against the dashboard anyway. And then she rear-ended somebody and I smashed into the windshield. And like spider cracked the whole windshield with my head.
Oh my God.
And I was young. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm totally feeling that because this is happening with your body and and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is really crazy, but barely touching me though. You know what I mean? Like they just, they don't do a lot of, it's not manipulative at all. None of these procedures that we're talking about are like manipulative and very, just a really cool way and they can really help with babies too, with tight muscles and, positioning and all of that kind of stuff can really be super helpful. One of the other things that I wanted to say about infant feeding therapy is that sometimes with tongue ties, like sometimes if a baby does have a tie, but I'm not like super convinced that it is something that needs to be addressed yet, I will send them to feeding therapy because it's less invasive, like instead of just going, oh yeah, just go get a revision. Like, and I had that happen with a baby recently where the baby did indeed have a tongue tie, but the baby also had a hypergag reflex and wasn't sucking well. And I'm like, if you go get a revision, then that's more that the baby has to relearn. So let's figure this first part out first and see if that's something that we need. So it's like I prefer personally the less invasive route with a baby because I just think that's better for them instead of rushing. Because I've seen babies that have had revisions done and then they come back and they're like, well, we had a revision and the baby's still not feeding well. And it's like, because that probably wasn't the original problem. It just was another thing that the baby had, but it wasn't the original problem that was keeping them from feeding well. Yeah. And now the baby's got to figure out both of those things. Yeah. Which is a lot.
That's a lot. And that's so tricky because how do you know if the person that you're talking to is telling you the right thing?
Right.
We did that episode about that article about revisions, tongue tie revisions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to know, but you definitely want to be able to talk to somebody. That's why it's so important to like talk to a couple people and have the baby seen. And if you're I've even said to people sometimes, like, I see the tie, but I don't think that's the issue. Let's do feeding therapy, because the feeding therapist will be able to say, this is definitely an issue. This tongue tie is the problem. Like, they're going to be able to tell you that.
Then they can be the kind of second opinion, like before the major intervention.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that's why, like, if you're unsure and you don't want to like jump into revision, then I would definitely like seek out a infant feeding therapist, speech language pathologist that specializes in infant feeding, and have them take a look too. And that, like Abby said, that can be your second opinion. And that's really a great way to do it. And it's not invasive. And
right.
Maybe that's all you need is just your baby to get a little coordination. So it can be really helpful. So sometimes there's I'm probably forgetting others, but you've got some really, really great support systems. And sometimes people manage to get these support systems in place before they even have a baby, which is really amazing. You know, I'll have people that be like, I have a chiropractor and they work with babies, they're infant trained, and
that's
I
amazing.
know this cranial sacral therapy. I know, really. I love it when people have I have my lactation consultant that I'm going to use. I have, this and this, and it's like, wow. So, it can be really helpful if you're struggling a little bit, because there's other people that can help. And that's it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.